Okay, so we're gonna move into the fan install. So the first step is to unbox our fan kit here. This is gonna be the fan kit you're gonna get with your Adventure Wagon interior system. If you get your fan elsewhere, there's gonna be some components that aren't included. Just keep that in mind. So the first thing is gonna be our caulking. This is what we're gonna actually attach the fan ring to the roof with. So that'll come a little bit later. And then next are gonna be a couple components from Maxxair directly. So this is gonna be your owner's manual, your like operation guide for the fan itself. And then your remote with batteries as well. Come here. And you're gonna have a little bag of hardware. So this is gonna have a number of screws and then some little butt connectors that you're gonna use to connect your fan to the wiring harness. You are gonna have some hardware in here that you're not gonna use. For our application, we actually just use the caulking as an adhesive. And we don't attach the fan ring with any screws to the roof like you would normally. So keep that in mind. And then we have a trim ring here from Adventure Wagon. So this is going to be a roof adapter. That's going to kind of help bridge the gap. There's a few corrugations in the roof that wouldn't allow the fan to sit flush. So this has some little raised bits on either edge that are going to account for those corrugations and allow the fan to adhere nicely. So we're going to pull out the fan itself. Okay, so this has a few components attached to it right now. The first being, this is going to be your interior shroud. So this is going to be like the very last step in your full system install. It's going to just create a nice trim ring from your panel into the fan itself. So put this somewhere safe. It's going to be a while before you're going to use it. And then you also are going to have your interior trim ring. So this is going to go on the roof through the hole we'll cut in a minute here. And these clips, we'll talk about this again later, but are going to be on either side of the van. And it's going to sit down in the roof like this. We're also going to use this to mark off our sections of where we're going to cut. So keep that close. And then you have your actual fan. So set this aside and we'll install this after the adhesive is set and cured and all that good stuff. So, and that should be everything. Yep. Well, that's it. And let's get into the install. So we're going to move into the fan placement. Because we're in the Ford Transit high roof extended cargo model, we're going to have 3 options for placement. And we're going to use our actual Maxxair fan like internal trim ring to set that placement for us. So the first is going to be in this, technically the second rib. The first one's going to be kind of a domed ceiling ribs or ceiling panel, so you wouldn't want to set a fan in that anyway. So it's this second flat rib or ceiling bay here. And you're going to use your fan ring to butt up right against the flange on this aft rib. And then that'll allow you to get placement of this front fan placement. And we'll show some close-ups of this as well. And then moving forward, this is kind of the middle location. It's in the 4th ceiling bay. So this one's just about perfect size for a fan front to back. So you're not going to have a hole. That's going to help you a lot with your placement. And then side to side on all of these, there's these little corrugations on either side, and that's going to help you center your fan hole. And we're going to actually install the fan here, so we'll kind of move in closer on that one in just a second. The last location is going to be in this very last ceiling bay, so technically bay 6. And we're going to butt it up against this forward ceiling rib, the flange on there. So you can probably see now that you just butt this right up to that flange and then center it in between those corrugations here. Okay, so let's move into this middle one. So as you can see, this is just about 14 inches wide, which is going to be how big our hole is. So this is going to have 2 sides to it. One side has these clips on there that will come into play when we do the roof install. I'm going to use the other side to put up against the roof since it's going to sit flush and allow us to measure a little easier. So we can place this right up here. It's going to fit just perfectly in there. You might even have to move some of like the factory adhesive out of the way, but it should kind of just nestle in there. And then like we were talking about those corrugations on either side, you can kind of move it back and forth until you have it centered using those as a guide. And as soon as you have it centered here, we're going to make some marks. Now that we have our hole marked off for our fan placement, we can go ahead and start to drill pilot holes. So the first thing you want to think about is, since we use this as our kind of placement ring, this is going to need to fit inside that hole. So you need to account for the depth of this, this outer lip here, if that makes sense. So I'm going to drill out like a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch outside of my markings to make sure that this will sit down inside that hole. And it's always better to go a little bit bigger. You're gonna have a little bit of room, like on here, you have a little bit of room to play with if your hole's a little too big. But if it's too small, you're gonna have to kind of mess with it, trying to open it back up and things like that, which can get a little messy. There's a couple ways you can go about drilling the actual pilot holes. I'm gonna use a step bit, but if you don't, you should have one for the rest of your build. But if you wanted to use just a series of drill bits, you can do that as well, just starting small and getting bigger. The goal is to basically just the jigsaw blade needs to fit down easily inside those holes so we can make the cuts from the top. I'm going to use a little punch here to mark off where I want to start drilling. It's just going to keep my step bit from drifting side to side at first. So I already placed one punch hole in this corner here. I'm starting my drill like maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from my marking, and then just open it up from there. Like we said, going a little bit bigger than those markings are. So I'm going to go around and punch holes in all the rest of the corners here. It's going to be a little loud. You can also use a little tiny drill bit for this part as well. So for this part, you want to make sure to wear eye protection. You're going to have some metal shavings coming down, and then long sleeves can sometimes be nice too. The hot shavings can kind of fall down and burn you at certain points. Okay, so now that we've drilled our pilot holes from the inside, we've moved up to the roof of the van, and you can see we have our 4 holes here. What I like to do is take this inner trim ring and just set it lightly on top of those holes we drilled. And that's just gonna show us if we need to open them up more at all, because you want this again to sit inside those holes. And you can kind of see here that we do, especially this one in this top corner there. We're gonna wanna open that up a little bit, and I'm gonna open them all up a little bit just in case. So I'm going to take this out and then move back in with my step bit here and open them back up. Okay, that looks a lot better here. So I'm just going to take my deburring tool and do a quick swipe with that. Now that we have that all done, I'm going to take a rag and just kind of get rid of some of those metal shavings. And take some painter's tape here, and we're just going to tape along like on just the outside of all the holes here. It's going to help create a guide for us when we're making our cuts. Okay, well that's going to be a pretty good guide. We're also going to take a ruler and just make a straight line as well, because that tape can drift a little bit. Okay, I'm going to do one last double check, and you can make sure that your trim ring here is going to sit inside your lines. It's looking pretty good here. And you can, if you notice that you need to go a little wide on some sides, you can just make a little bit of a mental note. So I can tell here that my forward to back is really good, but I'm gonna go just outside my line here to make sure that this will fit inside. I'm going to use a jigsaw for this. You might want to, it will get pretty loud if you want to use some like earplugs or something like that for protection. And again, you want to use your eye protection for this as well. And we're gonna go around and cut along the sides. We're gonna stop short just before the next hole. It's gonna keep the piece from falling inside as you're making the rest of your cuts. And then at the end, we'll go ahead and finish off all of those. And either we'll show you a trick to kind of catch it if you're doing it by yourself, or you can have someone stand underneath and catch it for you as well. As you can see, we've made all of our cuts, but the piece is still attached. That's because we left those little tabs at every corner. It looks like one kind of came loose here, but that's okay. It's actually gonna help us. So if you're working by yourself, you can take your ruler and slide it in here. Be careful, this is gonna be sharp. You can slide it right under this edge, and that's gonna help support it while you make the rest of your cuts. I'm gonna have someone kind of stand underneath and catch it, because it's just a little bit easier, less room for error, that kind of a thing, because you don't want this crashing down onto your floor. You can also lay some protection down underneath, like a few layers of cardboard, something like that, if you are working by yourself, just in case it does fall through. So we're gonna go ahead and finish off these cuts. Beautiful, thank you. Okay, so now that we have our fan hole cut, we're gonna go ahead and test fit our trim ring here. So we're gonna just place it right inside. So it looks like my hole's actually a little bit small. So definitely not the end of the world. We're just gonna go ahead and take a little bit of more space off. In this center placement for the transit, it can be a little bit tricky because you are right up against the flange of that rib. So that's kind of what happened on this edge, is I was hitting it here, so I tried to kind of correct and ended up overcorrecting on this edge. So I'm gonna go ahead and just go through with a flapper wheel on a grinder. If you don't have that, that's totally fine. You can just use a file if you only have a little bit to take off, or you can go back through with your jigsaw as well if you need to take quite a bit off. Okay, so we took a little bit off the edges with our flapper wheel, and so we're gonna test fit this again. So let's see how it fits a lot nicer in there. That's awesome. So we can take that out for now, and we can remove the tape here. You can take your file, and you just want to get any burrs that are kind of sticking out. Just go all the way around the edge. Okay, so now that we've went around the outer edge with the file, we're gonna go and just take a little piece of Scotch-Brite and just scuff up around the area where we're gonna put the adhesive. It's just gonna allow it to kind of attach a little bit better, have something to grab onto. You don't have to go crazy. Just kind of go around the outer edge here. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to take a little bit of, we have acetone, but you can use mineral spirits, any kind of fast drying cleaner to kind of get all the dust and debris out from under where we're going to place the adhesive. Okay, so now that we have that all taped off and everything prepped, we want to make sure to do our rust preventative around the inner corners of where we made the actual cuts. This is going to just prevent rust from happening over time, especially in an area right here that in theory could be exposed if there's leaks or anything like that. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and wipe up any drips I made around the edges. Okay, and then you just want to wait about 10 minutes or so for this to dry. It'll turn black around the edges as soon as it's ready to go. Okay, so now that the rust preventative has dried, we're going to go ahead and start applying our adhesive. So we're going to put it on the underside of this trim ring first. So the side that the little bump outs come up on, and it's also the side that has the little grooves in it as well. So you want to do that one first. So you can use any caulking gun. We have kind of a fancy one here. It's automated, but anyone will work. This just helps us get a little bit more of a consistent bead. But we're gonna do 3 beads around that outer edge, about an 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch thick. But just doing 3 helps to make sure that you have a consistent amount of caulking around every part of the trim ring here. So we have our 3 beads around the exterior now. I'm just going back through and adding a little bit extra in the corners just to make sure those are going to be sealed up nice and tight. Okay, so now we're going to flip this over here. Again, be careful not to That's why we wear gloves at this part. Try not to get it on yourself or anything else. So we're going to carefully flip it over. And then place it right down into place here. Okay. So we're going to press down, not with your whole weight or anything like that, just enough. You can kind of go around the perimeter and see if you want a little bit to come out around the edges. You can kind of see it popping out here. Just barely see it. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to go and do that same thing on the underside of this trim ring. Again, you want to make sure you're caulking on the portion of the trim ring with these little corrugations on the top. Now that we have our 3 layers of caulking around the underside of this trim ring, it's time to put it into place. So just like with the other one, you want to be really careful here, trying not to get it on yourself or on the van. Let's see. Okay, and then the main thing you want to remember here is these clips need to be going to the outside of the van. So that's what we're going to screw the actual fan hood into. So really important there that those are on either side. And then we can just carefully drop this into place. Make sure it's fully seated in there. And then you're going to do the same thing on this one, just kind of press down until you see the adhesive just peek out underneath. And then now that this is all into place, we're gonna do one more round of adhesive just around this outer corner on both, like this top layer underneath the white trim ring, and then one on the bottom layer in between the van and the black trim ring, just to make sure everything's sealed up really nice. Here. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do is just put a little dollop of caulking in all of the screw holes, since for this application we're not going to use those. We just want to make sure they're sealed up. Most of them have caulking poking through already just from putting the trim ring into place, but just in case, we're going to go through. Just put a little bit there. These all have some kind of poking out. Okay, so now that we have all the adhesive placed and all of the gaps filled, we're going to go ahead and pull off our blue tape. Get that out of the way while it's still a little bit wet. And I try to have kind of a pile here where I can put it. It's going to have some adhesive on it. Okay. Now we're going to let this adhesive set up for about 24 hours before we drive the van or try to put the fan in the top, just to make sure everything's nice and secure before we start moving things around. Okay, so we let the adhesive dry on our trim ring here in the roof of the van. So now it's all set up and it won't move around or anything while we're trying to put the hood in. So the first thing we're going to do is you actually want to open the hood here. So I'm just going to turn the knob and it's gonna, you can kind of see it's bringing this piece up. This is gonna expose the screw holes on the side just so that we can attach it to the trim ring. So you should just, it'll just bottom out. You can stop it there. And the next thing we want to check is there's these little metal clips we're going to screw into. You just want to make sure those are popped up a little bit. You can see these are all kind of popped up. It's just going to make it easier to thread the screw into the hole. If they're totally down, it can be a little tough to get it started. So we're going to pop this on. You want the main hood facing towards the back. And then one other thing actually before we do that, there's a little wiring harness tucked in the side here. I like to pull this out because you want it to go into the hole. You don't want it to get caught up in your seal. So I just kind of place it on top here, and then when we put it over the hole, we can make sure it goes inside the van. So we can turn this around. You can see how that's kind of hanging there. And you want your hood facing towards the back. Place that down. Okay. So now you're going to grab your hardware kit that came in your fan box. And there's a few different sizes of screws in here. So there's 3 different sizes in all. I don't know if you can see that, but there's these ones with a white top. Set these aside. We're going to use these for like our inner shroud at the very end. So we don't want to use those. And then there's a longer screw and then a shorter, a little bit fatter one. These are the ones we want. We want the shorter ones right now. These longer ones would have been used for these holes, but since we didn't use those, we're just going to go ahead and set those aside, and you can use them for another project or down the line. We're not going to use them in this application. Should be 4 of these bigger ones in here. Perfect. Okay, in order to get these screws in, we might have to press down a little bit on the fan hood just to reveal that clip a little bit. We also like to use just a regular screwdriver for this, just to prevent stripping out the hole or the screw or anything like that. You don't need a full drill for this. So you can kind of sneak it in there and you'll start to feel it thread. Now that we've set those 4 screws in the fan hood, everything is all secure and sealed, so we're totally done with the fan install. We'll be able to close the fan from the inside of the van. And now we're all set to move on to the installation of the A-frame.